Well, hi, everybody. It's the Canes Corner podcast. I am Adam Gold. Thank you very much. On a post-draft hangover. I don't know what we are, but the draft is over, and I know some of you didn't like it. Some of us experienced it on our phones. Didn't watch all of it because why would you? Why would you? Anyway, heck, the NHL teams didn't even make it to Los Angeles. Just the commissioner, a whole bunch of celebrities, some awkwardness. Anyway, it's all good. The draft is the draft, and we'll talk about it, and we'll get give you some of my big picture thoughts about what's to come as we sit here just a few days away from the start of the free agent frenzy. And by the way, on the radio, that's how we're going to label it, free agent frenzy. Not sure it's going to be such a frenzy, but it's a pretty catchy slogan anyway. We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it is for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. There it is. You can see it right there on the screen, aluminumcompany.com. All right, real quick, we'll run down the picks, give you some broad thoughts. I told you before the draft, by the way, and I said this last year, and this is not, I have not split the atom here. I have not discovered cold fusion. But I told you before the draft that at number 29, Carolina was probably more likely to trade out of that pick than anything else. And it baffles me why we even ask these questions, because it's the same thing basically every year. The Hurricanes look at pick number 29, or for that matter, pick number 25, and pick number 40 as the same pick. Essentially, the player you want at 29 could be available at 40 or 42 or 48 or whatever it is. So the Hurricanes would rather have more darts to throw at the dartboard than pick 29th or 25th or 24th, whatever. So at number 29, unless somebody fell to them that they had like in their top 10, there's no chance they were going to make that pick. It's sad that we all had to stay awake for 4 hours of the draft to ultimately have happen what we all thought was going to happen, but them's the breaks. So here's what Carolina did, and Darren York talked about it. That was Darren York, by the way. Darren York talked about it, where he said the Hurricanes turned, 29 and 80 something into a first and a late third, turned a first and a third into 3 seconds and 2/3. Who wins? The Hurricanes probably do the draft better than any team. In a lot of ways, they are like the New England Patriots have been to the NFL draft, especially if you're consistently picking in the latter third, latter quarter, latter 5% of whatever it is. Carolina 29th pick. If you have a late pick and you can turn that into multiple seconds, I mean, you're a winner. Because, again, not a lot of difference between picking number 29. I frankly don't know who it was Chicago. I don't know who Chicago took at 29. Not a lot of difference in that pick in terms of having an impact in the NHL and where Carolina picked. And on top of that, just to stay even more on brand than trading back twice, was the fact that the Hurricanes drafted 4 Russian players of their 7 draft picks. So here's the breakdown. This year, 4 out of 7. Last year, 6 out of 10. The year before, 5 out of 10. The year before, 4 out of 7. So what is that? 19 out of the last 44 picks have come from Russia. And Darren York talked about it in his press conference. Well, what is it about Russian players? And here's the issue with Russian players. There are many organizations, and this is not a right or wrong. There are just many organizations that won't draft Russian players because that league is a competitive league to the NHL. and they don't like letting their players go. And a lot of their players stick around. They get good contracts. They can make a good bit of money over there. And so a lot of them, they stay there longer. It becomes harder to get some of those players over. It's also harder to scout. So the evaluation process is just a little bit more difficult. And the Hurricanes have seen it as a market inefficiency. So they scout, and Darren York talked about it. They scout all of the international countries. Said it doesn't matter where your passport's from. They scout all of those players the same way, and they put a value on each player. So it just so happens that some players that have greater value to Carolina because other organizations don't value them, it just so happens that those players have fallen to Carolina a lot more of late. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the geopolitical issues going on, but it probably does. And so the Hurricanes drafted a goalie, and then a center who actually played this year in the United States, and 2 big Russian defensemen before closing out the draft with 2 Swedes. So 4 Russians, 2 Swedes, and a kid from Maryland who's gone through the draft now 3 times, but had a great freshman season at Penn State. So Canes trade back in the draft twice. They actually traded up once. Shocked me. I was dodging all the Costco Graze eaters, all the people who line up for the food at each individual little station there, because that's a cottage industry. As I was dodging them, the Hurricanes traded back into the 3rd round, earlier in the 3rd round, to get to play, I guess, to take, who was it? Was that the Limitov guy? I don't know. Hurricanes drafted, they turned 29 and 80 something into 41, 49, 62, 67, 87. It's pretty good work by Darren York and Eric Tulsky and company to get that done. So they are to be commended for that. All right, let's get to some of the things. Like, you don't want me to talk about these players because we'd all be lying to say that we've seen them. I did see highlights of a couple. So I'll just mention the goalie here, and maybe the first few players. The highlights I watched of Simeon Frolov, they're impressive. 6'3", 205 pounds, moves well. They loved his lateral movement. That's what Darren York actually talked about today. His goals against, save percentage numbers, all good at every level or at every year that he has played. And he hasn't played beyond junior hockey, but he certainly looks like a prospect. And according to York, he was the number 1 rated goalie on their board. So that's great. After that, the kid from Penn State, after his freshman year, he is 20 years old, 6 foot, 190 pounds, hard to play against. He had 42 points in 37 games for the Nittany Lions, is one of the Big Ten Freshmen of the Year candidates. Then this guy, the guy they got with their 3rd second-round pick, Ivan Ryabkin, I believe is how you pronounce his name. 5'11", 190 pounds. It's pretty sturdy. 5'11", 190, 18 years old. He's had a weird year. I actually read about it. Monday on the program, we're going to talk to Nick Bass, who runs the Canes Prospects Twitter. Also a great Substack. And I was reading his players to watch. And he actually had a little write-up on Ryabkin, who said, really talented player, but had a really strange year. So he played some KHL games, I believe, or at least had a sniff at the KHL level, but ultimately as a junior player, and ended up coming over here and played in the U.S. Hockey League. He played for Muskegon, the Lumberjacks, I believe, and he had 30 points in 27 games. And they believe he can be a very good goal scorer. He is a center. He is a left shot, I believe, but still some red flags with conditioning and attitude and all that. But he's played in the United States, and we'll see if he can get coached up, if you will. Kurban Limitov is, I think, probably a name to keep an eye on. And here's why I say that. If for no other reason than this young man is a confident sucker. 18 years old, 6'3", 200 pounds. And played at Moscow Dynamo, whatever, Dynamo Moscow for the junior team. He had 23 points in 46 games. But they asked him, and I only saw this on the NHL's Twitter feed. They asked him who the best defenseman in the NHL was, and he said, me in 5 years. Okay. Love to see it. He is a left shot, so Slavin, Nikishin, and Limitov? Don't know. And then the other Russian they took, and I'm going to stop going through the draft picks, Roman Bauzov, and 6'5", great length, super reach, great skating ability, but 6'5", 180 pounds. But again, 18 years old. Everybody they draft, I guess 18 is not that big a deal because they're all 18, I guess. But 18 years old, he had 11 points in 41 games played, but very much a stay-at-home defenseman. But again, great skater and plays on the right side. All right. So that is my breakdown of the draft. We're not going to be here too much longer. I just want to get a couple of things in because I do have some thoughts on where we're headed. And I realize asking for patience at this time of the year is probably a foolish thing to do. And I don't have to ask you for patience because it ain't me. I'm not doing the trading, the picking, the free agents. I'm not doing any of that. Just telling you what I think is going to happen. And I don't want anybody to panic thinking that nothing is going to happen. So if you've been following this, it is very much a seller's market. There is simply not enough supply for the demand at this point because with the cap going up, and the cap hasn't gone up that much, but the cap has gone up enough. So, well, we were at about, 89 million last year? We're going to be at 95.5. And for a lot of teams, that's a player or two players or the ability to go after a bigger player that they wouldn't have been able to do go after a year ago. Look, all you got to do is go back and see where Carolina was with their cap situation last offseason, right? If the Hurricanes signed Seth Jarvis, they tried to sign Jake Gensel, screwed that up completely, but if they sign Gensel, Jarvis's contract probably looks different, and they probably trade Necas outright for futures because Carolina they just didn't have enough money to lay out. They would have had to make some pretty difficult decisions. I don't know, maybe they would have gone cheaper with the third defensive pairing and wouldn't have been able to bring in some of the players they brought in, whether it's Jack Roslovic. We probably could have survived without Roslovic. But anyway, Carolina had some cap issues last year. They have none of those this year, but they ain't alone. There's a lot of teams with cap room. Heck, Florida won a Stanley Cup, and they're definitely going to bring back two of the three big free agent players. Bennett's already signed. Marchand probably is next. Ekblad might be on the outside looking in, and we'll get to that in a minute. But my overall point is that there's the demand, the number of teams that are interested in making their teams better this year, not long term. The number of those teams is greater than the attractive players that are available on the market. So it's a highly competitive situation. And again, the cap's going up, and that leads to a lot of that, on top of the fact that you've got teams that like Buffalo, Montreal and Ottawa just made the playoffs. Columbus was close. Detroit. There are a lot of teams that think they can make the playoffs. The Rangers missed out last year. I'll bet the Rangers will be involved in free agency. I'll bet you. The Islanders, maybe they're still a year away. But look, there's going to be a lot of teams that think that they're ready to take the next step. In the West, man, Utah is one of those teams. Seattle is one of those teams that think that they can do it, that they can turn it around. Anaheim. So there's a lot of teams that might otherwise be selling. Flyers bought. So it just became a very, very inflated market. And if you know anything about the Hurricanes, and I know you all do because you are listening to this podcast, and maybe you take notes, maybe you don't, but I've said it before. Part of the reason why the Hurricanes have been loath to dip into free agency, to be trade deadline buyers, is because they don't want to pay elevated prices. They have a value, and you could be upset about this or not. I'm telling you, this is what the organization does. They have a value that they place on their own talent and what they believe players are worth in terms of acquisition cost, in terms of finances, in terms of contracts, and they are not going to go above it. So they don't pay the free agent tax. They won't do it. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine, and he said, well, what about Dmitry Orlov? I said, yeah, that was a market inefficiency. There weren't a lot of buyers. The Hurricanes way overpaid Dmitry. There's no way he was a $7.75 million a year player, but 2 years. And they knew they had the cap space to do it for 2 years. And he was always supposed to be a transition to get them to Alexander Nikishin. Boom. So that's an easy one to explain. So the Hurricanes are probably not going to be all into free agency. I'm not saying they won't, but it all depends on how, what some of these players are asking for and what the bidding war creates. Like, I know they like Nick Ehlers a lot, but if that number approaches 9.5, I think the Hurricanes are going to say no and let him go somewhere else. Let somebody else overpay for Nick Ehlers. I just don't believe Carolina is going to do that. Now, if they can get him, between 8 and 9, I think that's probably good value for somebody who's defensively responsible and can score. But I'm just saying that the free agent thing, they don't historically have not done it. They have not dipped into the trade deadline, conversation for the most part because they don't like the prices. The Gensel thing worked out, first half of it. Then, of course, they screwed it up. Let's keep in mind this. The Hurricanes, and I know as I say this, I can understand people are going to be fuming. They don't have to do anything. They don't. If they walked into next season with the exact same team they've got today, and I say this, I don't think they will, by the way, but if they did, Burns, Nikishin in place of Orlov, Chatfield, Gostisbehere, Walker, Morrow as an extra defenseman, maybe one of the other young guys kind of takes another step and becomes somebody viable. And again, they're going to have more players than they've got. Hurricanes are a playoff team. So they don't have to do anything. But that the goal is not to just make the playoffs. The goal is to, chase down a Stanley Cup. And for that, you got to chase down Florida. And I would point out every single team in the NHL, not named the Panthers, is looking up at Florida. Every single one of them. And nobody, in terms of the personnel, nobody's getting to them. Doesn't mean you can't beat them. But nobody is going to put a team on the ice as good as the Florida Panthers. Nobody. And that's even if Florida lets Aaron Ekblad walk into free agency. So the idea is, how close can you get? And that remains to be seen. It really does. So again, you're not filling out a roster. You are trying to improve what you've got, add to what you've got. And remember, Carolina's got about $28.5 million of cap room. And again, they've got, right now, by my calculations, one player to fill out an opening night roster of 20. One. That would be a sixth defenseman. All right, so we'll start this. And I'm not going to be here much longer, I promise. On July 1, Aaron Ekblad is going to be there. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to have interest in Aaron Ekblad. You just got to make the most compelling case. And it's going to be a 7-year deal, and I think it's going to be around 8. It might be a little bit north of that. And you have to decide, does Aaron Ekblad make us better? I think the answer is absolutely yes, certainly in the short term. Look, he's 29. In years 5, 6, 7, 8, he might be at the end. But, and I know it's not my money, I wouldn't worry about the second half of the contract. I just wouldn't. I want to know, because I'm trying to win the Stanley Cup now. I'm trying to pursue and track down Florida now. Does Aaron Ekblad make me better? Yeah, he does. So that's what I would do. I think the Hurricanes have 2 priorities. 2, getting a top pair right defenseman and a center. Those are the 2 priorities. Center who can play in your top 6, or at least be a strong enough third center to at least spread out the minutes between Jordan Staal and that center. And preferably it would be a right-sided center. And I know I keep saying it, and I know the organization won't do it, but I think Elias Lindholm is perfect. I don't know what you'd have to give Boston to get him, but I think Lindholm is perfect because, to me, he profiles more as a 2C. He might not be awesome. He might be just a 50-point guy, but I'd take a 50-point Elias Lindholm, the way he plays, right side, all situations, can be in the middle on the power play. Hey, might be your second unit power play guy, but you need one of those. And he's certainly not small, and he can play with some bite. I would do it in a minute, an absolute minute. And I'm not even that concerned with the acquisition cost. And the contract ain't as bad as everybody thinks. Vegas might be looking to shed a center. I don't know. My guess is no. But I would, anyway, I don't want to run down a list of thousands of players here. But those are the 2 priorities. Top pair right defenseman and a center who can play in your top 6. Everything else is next. Everything else. A scoring winger is next. Size, sandpaper, all of that stuff. That's secondary to those first 2 items. And if you're fortunate enough, maybe you can check multiple boxes with those first 2 things. Maybe you get a top right defenseman who can play with some snarl and has some size and even add some punch to the offense. Aaron Ekblad does that. And maybe your center's got some size and adds some of these other elements. Maybe can even chip in with the goal scoring. So you might be able to handle the other thing or the other things with those 2 items. And then if you do that, if it only costs you cash and a free agent signing, and I guess Brock Besser is in some ways an option here too. As I mentioned, Nick Ehlers. So if you can add something through free agency, it doesn't cost you anything in terms of prospect or NHL roster. And then you have to go out and you have to trade for your center because there are no centers really available in free agency. There's one, which wouldn't be a terrible option, but I don't think it's a great number two. Mikael Granlund, who finished the year in Dallas, they can't sign him. So I guess they could, but they'd have to get rid of a bunch of other things, which maybe they would, but because he was great for them in the postseason. But if you're the Hurricanes, I think you probably consider that. So depending on what you have to give up, maybe you can keep most of your roster intact because, frankly, there's a lot of guys I don't really want to give up. I don't want the Hurricanes to trade Jackson Blake because I think he's got a great future. And I think he's probably going to be a 50 to 60 point guy down the road. I'd love for it to be here. And I don't want them to give up the prospects, especially the ones that you're all in love with, Bradley Nadeau and company. I would love for them to not have to do that. And we'll see what the acquisition cost is on the trade market. My guess is if you want to get really better, you're going to have to give up one or more of these types of players. Hey, look, somebody was telling me that they were hearing rumors about Andrei Svechnikov being traded. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked depending on what the return is, right? You know, at some point, Andrei's going to figure it out. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. This is year 8 now. Maybe he won't. Maybe Andrei is who Andrei is. Maybe he's a 55-point, 60-point guy. Actually, he's been better than that. Last year wasn't, but maybe he's a 60-point guy. Maybe he's never going to be an 80-point guy. Maybe he's never going to be a 35 goal a year guy. I don't know. So I'm not anticipating a lot of trades for Carolina. I'm not anticipating a ton of action in free agency. Again, I think they have some options. I would target Ekblad if they had the opportunity. Want to make sure I've got a bunch of other things here I wrote down. I think more likely the forwards that they add, because I don't think they want to get into a bidding war for Ehlers or Besser. The forwards that they add are probably in the neighborhood of, Jordan Kyrou is available. Marco Rossi from Minnesota is smaller, but man, he's a good player. I don't know what Minnesota was doing with him in the postseason. They had really shrunk his ice time. I don't know. He tortured Carolina this year. Would you take Marty Necas? We won't even get into it. I do think Carolina's interested in Rasmus Anderson of Calgary, but I think Calgary right now wants a ton, and I think they are going to play the waiting game. And if you're Carolina, wait it out. You don't want to give up too much for a player who you're then going to have to pay a lot of money. And I think that's probably as much of a sticking point as anything, is that Anderson wants a fair amount of money. And I think he'll get it from whoever ultimately trades for him. But I think he won't finish the season with Calgary. And there's been some talk about Carolina being interested in Rasmus Ristolainen. I think he's okay. He certainly will play a physical game, and that's good. I don't know if I like him as a top pair with Jacob Slavin. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Anyway, I'll just wrap it up here. With the lack of depth in the free agent class, the number of teams who are interested in those free agents and who have cap room, I think it's going to be difficult to add through free agency. The one thing that I would overextend myself for would be an Ekblad. Absolutely would do it. It'll be interesting to see what Edmonton does with Evan Bouchard, who I thought had a disastrous Game 6 in the Stanley Cup Finals, but is an elite offensive defenseman. But are you willing to pay Evan Bouchard $11 million a year? But one thing I will say about Evan Bouchard, which is not like Dougie Hamilton and not like Noah Dobson, who's kind of a younger Dougie Hamilton, is that Bouchard, while not a great defender, Bouchard will play a little nasty. So it's not like necessarily part of his thing, but he will. He'll play a little nasty. And if you want to add offense, you certainly would be adding one of the top offensive right shot defensemen in the league. Anyway, I think Carolina is going to play the waiting game. I think they are more likely to circle back in free agency after the first. And I think you're going to see a fair amount of trade activity in the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after free agency, as all the dust settles and everybody takes a look at what they've got and where they need to trim. I think that's when you'll see Carolina make their moves. But I just think it's if you are an impatient fan, and I'm not telling you not to be, if you are an impatient fan, I think the next week might be rough. Because it's going to take some personal discipline to not get mad. Hey, me included. I want the same thing you do. I want this team to address their issues. I just don't think it's going to happen as quickly as we all want it to happen. With that said, hope you loved the draft. Somewhat awkward. Hey, the Goo Goo Dolls were there. All right. Gotta go. It's been great. I am Adam Gold. This is the Aluminum Company of North Carolina's Canes Corner podcast. AluminumCompany.com. Thanks to Sammy Hanna and crew for doing a great job. They will actually be out here at my house this week. That's right, this week. And hope all of you are having a good summer and staying cool. And, well, we'll probably try to get down to Prospect Camp a little bit the next week or so. It starts pretty soon. And we'll see what we can do. But we'll be back in about a week, and I appreciate your time. And I will see you next time on the Canes Corner podcast. Good night.